All right, so let's start then. And guys, please, questions. So this is the first tip. And whenever I teach this, I just believe more and more strongly in how powerful a principle this is. Lead one, it says slides are blurry on your side. I don't know if anybody else is struggling, but do let me know, please. And I'm happy. What I will do is in the Student Success Coach Facebook group, I'll provide the screenshots of all of these as well as the slides so that you can get access to them from there. So we've got two sentences there. The first sentence, you can read it there, and then the second sentence, what I've underlined in both sentences is the subject, which is also the character of the sort of story that's unfolding here. But notice how the writer has changed the subject from the first sentence to the second sentence. And Barley, I'll come to your question just now about proofreading. In the first sentence, the subject is the character. It is, and we learned this at school, right? A noun, people, place, thing, right? And you need to go back to that principle even at an academic level. And I'll explain to you why. Because if you make your subject an abstract concept, like it is in sentence 2 there, where it says the reason for Locke's frequent repetition. Now, reasoning is an abstract concept. It's not a person, place, or thing. What happens is you have to clutter your sentence with additional words. So look at the subject there. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words. Whereas in the first sentence, it's Locke. It's the name of the character. So make sure that your subjects are not abstract concepts. It's a very simple thing to do. And really, you need to be your own editor. You need to, be the person that puts red lines through your writing before somebody else does. I know I've had it. We've all had it. It's no fun. So Mercia says the slides are good on your side. That's fantastic. Okay, so just check internet connections there. And Nozipa, I'll put the Facebook page link on there just now. But please just dwell on this for a second. And one action that I want you to take going into the weekend and into your semester and the writing projects that you have for this year, if you get nothing else from this webinar, think about the subjects of your sentences. Are they the actor? Okay, and remember, it can be people, person, place, thing. Okay, is it as simple as that? Or have you tried to convey some level of complexity by making your subject an abstract concept? So, for example, the decision of the High Court in 1956 led to something or other. Just say, the High Court decided in 1956. So, again, this is our tendency to think more complicated in complicated ways and then write in more complicated ways because we're potentially dealing with complex ideas. And that's fine for a first draft. So as you do generative writing and as you just, get some words on the page, and I often say, if you don't know what to write, I don't know what to write. And as your thinking and your fingertips start going in sync, you'll be able to get more words on the page. But that first version of your generative writing is probably going to look a lot like sentence number 2. Then this tip says to you, go back and edit your writing to simplify your subjects of your sentences to be the clear doer, people, person, or thing. Okay. All right. Then another one here. And again, not going to read it, but you can see the subject in number 2 is an obscure action. Okay. It's still technically a subject because, you can describe it and it is a thing, but it's more abstract than in the first sentence. So where in the first sentence, you can see that the rainforests are the critical, clear and concise subject that the rest of the sentence then is linked to. But in the second sentence, the person writing this is trying to tell the story inside the subject. Okay. So don't try and do too much work of developing your argument in the subject. Strip down your subject back to people, person, thing, person, thing, place, right? That's what we learned at school, and that's what you need to be doing at varsity as well. There's absolutely no difference about it. However, there may be some instances where you cannot resolve it down and there is no clearer way of stating a subject, and that's absolutely fine. The problem comes in when people are writing like this throughout their entire thesis or writing project. And what happens is you will exhaust your reader and you will get a lot of red pen through your writing, because a reader is doing subconscious effort as they're reading your writing. So if you give them a lot of work to do by trying to understand complex subjects, they're not going to enjoy reading your writing. And again, we're not talking about the cat sat on the mat, that sort of elementary level of writing. You've got to, make sure that you convey unambiguously the complexity of the topic that you're talking about, but that doesn't have to complicate the sentence itself. The sentence must be as brutally clear and simple as possible, as you can see there in the first sentence. Okay, I don't see any questions. Let me just quickly then give you that to read and grab the Student Success Coach Facebook group link and pop that into the chat for you. So Nozipo, there is the link. So Nozipo asked for the Facebook page link. And Nozipo, if you weren't with us at the beginning, just to say that we've got a fantastic community there. I think we've got about 2,300 students at all levels, helping each other, supporting each other. There are mentors in there, as I indicated just now. We even had somebody needing a monitor during the week. If you were in last week's webinar, I talked about how people have used the group as a bit of an accountability platform. So they burn their boats in the Facebook group, and they'll come on in the morning and say, right, I'm committing to do this, this, and this today as part of my studies. And that accountability of telling the rest of the group what you're going to do then focuses your mind to prioritize on those tasks, because in the absence of that shared accountability, you'll find every reason to go watch Netflix and do a million other things and, scroll social media, for example. So that's just another example of how powerful the Facebook group is. Okay, let's deal with Rama's question. Best way to reduce plagiarism when writing. So number one, and where this comes in, is obviously when we sort of use citations and we're reading other people's work, and they seem to just have a brilliant grasp on the topic better than we could. And so the temptation is to just reuse that. So obviously, if you are found guilty of plagiarism, it can be catastrophic for your studies, and you can be blacklisted, and it, can potentially be blocked even from other universities. You'd certainly be kicked out of the university that you are at. So a good question, because it is definitely something that you want to avoid. And it further reinforces what I was saying earlier, is that we want our students to have independent thinking, right? We need everyone on this webinar today to solve the problems that they're working on. I firmly believe that the problems of the world today require the rigor of the academic research process. But regurgitating other people's work just as a quick way of getting your degree, that's not making a contribution. That's going to add a black mark to your name. But what I think Rama is saying is that sometimes it could happen unintentionally. Okay, and what I was saying there was that when you cite other sources, obviously you must put quotation marks around that text. But if you are citing and rewording other people's writing, then you must do so sufficiently that it doesn't look like plagiarism, because the university will put your writing through a system like Turnitin, or there's a couple of others, and it will measure the degree that your writing is the same or similar to the rest of the writing that's available out there on the internet. So it uses very advanced AI and other algorithms to do that. So rule number one is put direct quotes into quotation marks, obviously, and then those are excluded from that system. When it sees the quotation marks, it doesn't judge that as plagiarism. But when you are incorporating or integrating someone else's writing into your own paragraph, you have to be very careful that you reword the sentence to add your own independent thinking and opinion on that writing. And Rama, the section of your thesis where this becomes the biggest issue is in your literature review, most of the time, because you're talking about other sources, you're quoting them, and you're building up some groundwork of your own literature review before you actually go into your own study. So there is I cover a little bit of this in the courses that I'll share today, but there's a lot more detail on it in my proposal online course, where I help you then actually develop a literature review and give you some pointers for how to incorporate other sources in the writing of your literature review. Okay. Cindy says, hi, Cindy, good to have you, a regular webinar viewer. One of the comments that I had about my literature review chapter is that it was more of a summary than a critical piece of writing. How can we avoid making it? Absolutely. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. We don't want a description of what is already there, okay, because people can go and read those sources. We want your critical assessment of those sources. We want you, and this is where academics is fantastic, because it gives you that space to critically engage with other writers and other sources. What I'll do is I'll dig out a couple of resources that will help you with this. There's a couple of very good blog articles that I can think of off the top of my head. Cindy, but to answer your question, the single biggest advice that I can give you is are you bringing in enough of your own criticism or critical thinking, shall we say, of other sources? And a very good way to do this, Cindy, is, and sometimes we get nervous of being critical from an academic perspective. And often a very good way of doing that is actually to compare two different sources. And when you compare two different sources that have two very different conclusions, they can't both be right. Yeah. So when you engage with sources and you find different conclusions on the same topic or from the same data set, for example, and those researchers disagree, the way that you critically engage and present what they've been talking about and how you link those two sources together in your literature review will start to ensure that you don't do this type of summarizing, because summarizing is just saying, source 1 says this, source 2 says this, source 3 says this, source 4 says this. But if you say source 1 disagrees with source 3 and source 2 is agreed with source 4, you've already started to engage and compare those sources and apply some critical thinking to them. And then you could say, well, my hypothesis for my study, because you haven't done your study, you don't have any findings yet. You say, my hypothesis is that actually source 2 and 4, need further investigation or had gaps in their methodology, and which I'm then going to explore in my own study. Okay, so a little bit of thoughts there for you, Cindy.